Right back into the action on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. A lot of talk around the New York Giants in this episode, in this segment, and the following. First, we're going to look at that second episode of Hard Knocks that dropped this past Tuesday. And it had a lot more to do with that conversation that finally led into Saquon Barkley ending up in free agency. Something that was almost, it seemed almost impossible talking about this probably like 2 or 3 years ago with the contract, coming up for Saquon, the contract talks coming up for him. You never really thought it could get to this point, especially after they franchise tag them. Usually when teams do that, you can see their intention of really wanting to keep the player. And oftentimes when they do that, I feel like they do relinquish the power a little bit, or almost just relinquish the idea that they want to keep him. They want to keep him. They franchise tag him just to have a little bit of extra time, and they usually end up giving in to the player's wants. But it is interesting with the running backs, obviously, because around the market and how devalued it's become. And with Saquon, he was looked at it like that, but also I feel like the Giants failed to realize that, Saquon isn't like other running backs. I think teams really like to group all these running backs in, and feel like they're all going to get injured past the age of 26 or 27. And I just think that's almost not fair to these running backs. A lot of them, I could admit that a good amount of them probably drop off by 27, 28 potentially. But even then, I feel like you have to make a difference and draw a line between the majority, your average running back that's good, that's solid, that could get you around 900, 1,000 yards. But then you get into the very few, like a Saquon or a Christian McCaffrey, or maybe even a Derrick Henry in his day and age. But really, in my opinion, it's only Christian and Saquon that are in that group. And that's why I felt that these talks, these efforts by the New York Giants really didn't do Saquon the fairness and the justice that he deserved, because of everything that he put into the Giants. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. And I'm not even a Giants fan to have some sort of connection to how this all broke down, but it just felt fishy, and it just felt like they didn't do Saquon right. And he moved on. He signed with Philadelphia this offseason. But talking about the specifics of their conversation, from episode 1, we knew that the franchise tag wasn't really going to happen because of the fact that they already did it before, and the potential $7 million salary that they wanted to offer him. It was a thought, but general manager Joe Schoen didn't want to go through with it, just because of the idea that if he did go through with it, he would have been looked at as disrespecting Saquon. Almost like, how dare you offer him this little of money? But that's where the running back market is now. Teams are pretty scared and pretty intimidated to pay more than $8-9 million for a 27-year-old running back. But now, leading into episode 2, you saw a brief conversation between general manager Joe Schoen and also assistant general manager Brandon Brown. And they talked initially about how they were going to try and convince Saquon of trying to stay. You had Joe Schoen talking to Brandon Beane almost in a way that he would want to talk to Saquon, or almost giving out his actual thoughts about what he thought about Saquon and their pitch to try and keep him. In that statement, it was a brief statement that he said. He said, as you guys can see here, "Hey, here is our price. You want your name up here forever. 2 more years, you're in the Ring of Honor, or you want $1 million more to go somewhere else." Joe Schoen said that to Brandon Brown, but that was actually never said directly to Saquon, but you kind of got an idea of how their mindset was at this time. And I did find it fascinating, because you're trying to pitch him that idea of being a Giant forever, being that guy that stayed with the franchise through the tough time, being looked at as this hero who loved just the organization. But at the same time, I feel like they were overly secure, obviously, in that sentiment, or at least Joe Schoen was, just because in his statement he says, or you want $1 million more to go somewhere else. And he actually ended up getting about $5 to $4 million more in his deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. So he was pretty much set in that mindset that nobody in their right mind would pay Saquon over $10 million. He pretty much had the idea that the running back market was going to be as how he planned it out to be, at least in his mind, and how they were approaching Saquon with a new deal. And I talked about it last week, actually believing that nobody out of the 31 other teams that are out there, nobody was going to offer Saquon a double-digit salary is pretty ridiculous to actually believe that. Because once you offer him, once you put him on the market, it's free range. Nobody has any hesitancy to go after Saquon or pitch him anything at that point. With the franchise tag, you had a little bit of protection, and not offering it to him at that point and putting him just on the free market. I'm sure a lot of teams looked at each other like are these guys serious? Putting Saquon up there for free, and then they took advantage of it. The Eagles did, and it really led off from this thought. And then you actually get into the conversation he had with Saquon, and that one was a little bit just more. Was more like he was trying to gaslight Saquon a little bit. And I'll show you what I mean with what he said in that conversation. Mostly JioSaavn just talking to Saquon, really saying, the right thing to do is let you test the market to see what your value is. I don't want to do the franchise thing or that stuff again. I don't want to go through that. We've both been through that. If you really want to be a Giant for life and you're interested in coming back, see what your market is and have Ed come back to us, and we'll see if we can come to an agreement. Then Saquon Barkley said, all right, that's cool. We're going to do that. Then before they get off of the phone, you can kind of see JioSaavn a little bit rattled is the way that it's the word that comes up to me right now when he says, can you give me your word on that, or are you not going to give us a chance? At that point, you really see, I think for the first time in these first two episodes, that he kind of comes to the realization that, Saquon could actually really leave. Saquon wasn't really giving him much back in terms of conversation. It was very short answers. And then at that moment, it seemed like he really realized that this could actually be the last of it, the last time Saquon is actually considered a Giant. That's why you almost get that last word out there, like almost saying, do you promise you're going to at least give us a chance? Do you promise you're at least going to show us the offer? But at that point, I can almost see how Saquon could take it. I'm just assuming, obviously. But for everything that he's done, for everything that he meant to this organization, especially drafting him number 2 overall, going through the injuries, being the face of the team, through all the really bad times, for them to offer him $7 million and then letting him test the free agent market, almost like insinuating that he's going to come crawling back to them. It makes me think, why would I give you my word if you're going to value me this low for everything that he did throughout his time there, setting a bunch of records, being as prolific as he has been, for them to offer him $7-8 million and then just still let him walk. All Saquon said was, I already told you where I wanted to be, so he was going to take the opportunity to hit the free agent market, and luckily for him, he signed that deal with the Eagles 8 days later, 3 years, $37 million, and the biggest thing about it was $26 million guaranteed, which is huge for a running back this day and age in that market. To get that sort of money, with everything that the Giants were showing him, and then for this opportunity to show up in a running back market like it is right now, I don't blame Saquon for taking it. He might have felt a certain way about the Giants, but you can't pass up an opportunity like that, regardless if it's the Giants or the Cowboys who were offering. Saquon probably would have had a tough time saying no to either, and he accepted the one from the Eagles. He moved on, and now we find ourselves where we are right now. And this conversation, not talking about just the Giants and how this all broke out, but it gave a good insight on how some of these hard conversations really go and how honest they could be, and just how just raw they could be at times when you see an organization that have really gotten a lot from this player. He has done a lot for this team. For them to still be relevant a little bit, a big part has been for Saquon and for all that he's done. And you would at least anticipate that they would have offered him something. A lot of fans don't get the insight that Hard Knocks does provide. So seeing this and getting an explanation for how Saquon actually ended up away from your team, if you're a Giants fan, it really opens up a lot of eyes, and you can see into the behind the scenes of why this is really truly a business in some aspect, and you have to make some really hard decisions. And I feel like the Giants were wrong in this. I don't think that's any surprise to anyone. But at the end of the day, with how it all broke down, with how he was talking to Saquon, it just makes me think like it was just a preservation attempt to try and get him to come back, knowing that you made a wrong decision already, but you're already handcuffed to it. Trying to get Saquon to come back with this last-ditched attempt was pretty interesting to see, and how he actually tried to break it down to Saquon and how maybe he truly believed that this could happen. But again, I've said it before, paying Daniel at the end of the day, they've made that decision. So now they were faced with this hard reality, and it ended up how it did. Obviously, there was a chance he could have gone somewhere else. If you were to lose him, you didn't want to lose him to the Eagles, but that's how it ended up happening. And now there's a lot of expectations going into this season. And now moving on from Saquon, you got a new running back in. It's a prove-it year for Daniel Jones. You have to just swallow this pill and just move forward with the decisions that you make. And hopefully it turns out all right for them, because they did improve. I like Malik Neighbors coming in. I like the young pass rushers that they have, or the young pass rushers and the young pass catchers as well. But it's hard to be optimistic when you lose a generational player like Saquon was for this team. But we'll see how this plays out. The episodes have been pretty good for Hard Knocks already. So I will be definitely seeing more of these episodes as they are released every Tuesday in this month. But that'll be it for the offensive side of the ball for the Giants. We're going to quickly transition into a break, and then on the other side, we're going to talk about the other side of the football for the Giants as well. In a bit more of a positive light, linebacker Bobby Okereke is very optimistic about their new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, and what he's bringing to that side of the ball, and how he expects to make a massive jump in 2024 to at least help this team out on the defensive side of the ball. Stay tuned to find out what he said and why this team could be a lot better on defense next season. We'll be right back after this break.